My boss called me replaceable, he regretted it the same day. You're replaceable, Thomas. Remember that. Mr. Harrison's words hit me like a slap across the face during our morning meeting. The entire management team sat frozen around the conference table, staring at their laptops like they hadn't heard anything. But they had. Everyone had heard him dismiss 3 years of my dedicated work in one casual sentence. I'd just suggested we delay the product launch by 2 weeks to fix critical bugs I'd found in the system. Bugs that could cost the company millions if we went live. His response was to remind me of how disposable I was. I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment and anger. 20 people witnessed my humiliation. I nodded slowly, closed my notebook, and stood up. You're absolutely right, sir, I said calmly. I am replaceable. Consider this my 2 weeks' notice. The room went silent. Mr. Harrison's confident smirk faltered for just a second, before he waved his hand dismissively. Fine. Clear out your desk today. We don't need 2 weeks. I walked back to my desk in a daze, my hands shaking as I pulled out the cardboard box we kept in the supply closet for exactly this purpose. 3 years at Datacore Systems. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, skipped vacations, and missed family dinners. I'd built their entire client management system from scratch. Every line of code, every feature, every security protocol had my fingerprints on it. And I'd documented nothing. Well, that wasn't entirely true. I'd documented everything in my personal encrypted files that only I could access. Company policy said all documentation should be shared, but I'd learned early in my career to protect my work. My colleague Rita stopped by my desk, her eyes wide. Thomas, what just happened? You can't actually be leaving. I continued packing my things. Personal coffee mug, the plant my girlfriend bought me, photos of my family. He called me replaceable, Rita. So I'm letting him replace me. Word spread through the office faster than I could pack. People kept walking by, pretending to go to the printer or break room, stealing glances at me boxing up 3 years of my life. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked nervous. They should be nervous. I wasn't the only one holding crucial knowledge that wasn't properly documented. That was the thing about Mr. Harrison. He was brilliant at sales and terrible at understanding what actually made the company run. He thought developers were interchangeable parts, like batteries you could swap out whenever one died. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek in accounting. Dude, everyone's freaking out. Harrison's asking where the system documentation is. I smiled and didn't respond. Let them figure it out. I'd offered to create comprehensive documentation 6 months ago, and Harrison had said it wasn't a priority. That we needed to focus on new features instead. Well, priorities have consequences. By noon, my desk was empty except for my company laptop, which I'd already wiped of all personal files. I'd followed protocol perfectly, removing only what belonged to me and leaving all company property intact. The IT department couldn't say I'd stolen anything. I logged out of every system, cleared my browser history, and shut down the laptop for the last time. My badge sat next to the keyboard. 3 years reduced to a piece of plastic with my photo on it. I picked up my box and headed toward the exit. The office felt different now, like I was already a ghost. People I'd worked with daily suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. Rita caught up with me at the elevator. Thomas, Harrison's been in his office making phone calls for the last hour. Something's wrong. I pressed the down button. That's not my problem anymore, Rita. Good luck with the launch tomorrow. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, taking one last look at the office that had consumed so much of my life. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. My phone started ringing as the elevator descended. Mr. Harrison. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. Declined. A text came through. Thomas, we need to talk about transition procedures. I typed back quickly. As you said, I'm replaceable. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Another call. Another decline. The elevator reached the ground floor, and I walked through the lobby, nodding at security guards, who'd checked my badge every morning for 3 years. Outside, the afternoon sun felt warmer than usual. I put my box in my car, and sat in the driver's seat, processing what had just happened. 3 hours ago, I'd had a job. Now I had freedom and a severance package. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. 4 missed calls from Harrison. 2 from Rita. 1 from the IT director. I drove to my girlfriend Lucy's workplace and waited in the parking lot. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and her shift ended at 3. When she came out, she looked surprised to see me. Babe, what are you doing here? Are you sick? I got out of the car, grinning. I quit my job. Her eyes went wide. You what? I explained everything while we stood in the parking lot. Harrison's comment, my resignation, the panicked calls already starting. Lucy knew how much I'd sacrificed for Datacore. She'd spent countless evenings eating dinner alone while I fixed emergencies. She'd cancelled vacation plans when Harrison demanded I work through holidays. Now she started laughing. Oh my God, Thomas. What are they going to do? I shrugged. Not my problem anymore. She kissed me hard. I'm so proud of you. You should have done this months ago. We decided to celebrate with an early dinner at our favorite restaurant. My phone kept buzzing with calls and texts that I ignored. By evening, the calls had multiplied. Harrison had called 8 times. The IT director called 5 times. Even the CEO's assistant had called twice. I finally listened to one voicemail from Harrison. His voice was tight and controlled, trying to sound casual. Thomas, I think we both said some things in the heat of the moment. Let's talk about this professionally. We can work something out. Heat of the moment. He'd planned that humiliation. He'd wanted to put me in my place in front of everyone. Now that he realized what my absence meant, suddenly he wanted to be professional. I deleted the voicemail. Lucy and I were having wine and pasta when my phone rang again. This time it was Rita. I answered because she'd always been kind to me. Thomas, it's chaos here. Nobody can access the client database. The launch is tomorrow and nothing works. Harrison's losing his mind. I twirled pasta on my fork. Sounds stressful. Rita's voice dropped to a whisper. Thomas, he's threatening to sue you. Saying you sabotaged the system before leaving. I almost laughed. I didn't touch anything, Rita. I logged out properly and followed every protocol. IT can check the logs. There was a pause. That's what IT said. They can't find any evidence of tampering. But nothing works and nobody knows why. I knew exactly why. The system wasn't sabotaged. It was just incredibly complex, with dozens of interconnected parts that I'd built over 3 years. Without documentation, without my knowledge of how everything fit together, it was essentially a black box. Have they tried checking the integration protocols? I asked. Rita sighed. They don't know what that means. Of course they didn't. Because Harrison had never let me train anyone properly. He'd said cross-training was inefficient. That specialists should specialize. Well, now his specialist was gone. I have to go, Rita. Enjoy your dinner. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. No panicked rush to check emails before breakfast. No anxiety about what crisis would be waiting at the office. Just quiet morning coffee with Lucy before she left for her shift. My phone had 17 missed calls and 23 unread texts. I scrolled through them while eating breakfast. Harrison had apparently spent the night at the office with the IT team trying to fix things. The launch had been delayed. Clients were asking questions. The CEO was demanding answers. One text from Rita made me pause. They're offering to double your salary if you come back. Harrison's desperate. Double my salary. To fix the mess that existed, because Harrison had refused to let me work properly. Because he'd cut corners on documentation and training. Because he'd valued speed over sustainability. I finished my coffee and opened my laptop. Time to send some emails to recruiters I'd been quietly talking to for months. Turns out being replaceable goes both ways. By noon, 3 companies had responded to my applications. By 2, I had phone interviews scheduled. Apparently, senior developers with my experience were in high demand. Who knew? Well, I knew. That's why Harrison's replaceable comment had been so absurd. He had no idea what the job market looked like for someone with my skills. My phone rang again. This time it was the CEO, Richard Morrison. I'd met him twice in 3 years, both times briefly. Thomas, Richard Morrison here. I understand we have a situation. His voice was calm, professional. I respected that he'd called himself instead of sending more messages through Harrison. Hello, Mr. Morrison. I'm not sure I'd call it a situation. I resigned yesterday. He cleared his throat. I've been reviewing what happened. Harold Harrison's comment was inappropriate and doesn't reflect our company values. I'd like to discuss bringing you back. Harold Harrison. I'd never known his first name was Harold. With respect, sir, what are your company values exactly? There was a long pause on the line. I understand you're upset, Thomas. You have every right to be. What Harrison said was unacceptable. I walked to my window, looking out at the street below. It wasn't just what he said, Mr. Morrison. It's how the company operates. I've been asking for documentation time, proper training procedures, and reasonable workloads for 2 years. Every request was denied. More silence. Then, I wasn't aware of those requests. Of course he wasn't. Because Harrison filtered everything that went up the chain. He made himself look efficient by overworking his team and cutting corners on sustainability. The launch is failing because there's no documentation, I continued. That's not sabotage. That's the natural consequence of poor management decisions. Richard sighed heavily. What would it take for you to come back? Name your terms. I'd been thinking about this all morning. Triple my previous salary, Harrison's removal from any supervisory role over me, a team of 3 developers I can train properly, and 6 months dedicated to documentation before any new features. Richard didn't hesitate. Done. All of it. Can you start Monday? I almost dropped my phone. I'd expected negotiation, pushback, compromise. You're agreeing to everything. He laughed, but it sounded tired. Thomas, our biggest client is threatening to leave. The launch failure could cost us millions. Your salary demands are nothing compared to that loss. And frankly, after reviewing Harrison's management style, changes were needed anyway. I sat down, my mind racing. This was more than I'd hoped for. But something made me hesitate. I need it in writing. Contract revised, terms guaranteed for minimum 2 years, and a formal apology from Harrison witnessed by HR. Another pause. The apology might be difficult. I stood firm. Then we don't have a deal. I won't work somewhere that tolerates disrespect. Richard spoke with someone in the background, muffled voices discussing something. Then he came back. You'll have everything in writing by end of day. Harrison will apologize Monday morning. Welcome back, Thomas. I hung up and sat in stunned silence. In 24 hours, I'd gone from humiliated and unemployed to having everything I'd wanted for years. Triple salary. Real authority. A team. Resources to do things right. And Harrison would have to apologize in front of witnesses. Lucy called during her break and screamed when I told her. Thomas, that's incredible. Are you going to take it? Was I? Part of me wanted to refuse out of pride. To let them struggle and take one of the other job offers. But another part of me, the part that had built that system from nothing, wanted to fix it. Wanted to prove that doing things right was possible. I think I am, I said slowly. But on my terms this time. Lucy laughed. I'm so proud of you. Drinks tonight. We made plans to celebrate. My phone buzzed with an email. The revised contract, already drafted, with every term I'd requested. Richard Morrison moved fast. I read through it carefully, looking for catches. There were none. Everything was there in clear language. Rita called that evening, ecstatic. Thomas, everyone's talking about it. You're coming back as Senior Development Director. Harrison's been moved to business development only. No team management. People are celebrating. I felt strange hearing the news spread. Rita, I need to ask you something. If I build a proper team, would you want to transition from admin to development? You've always been interested. She went quiet. Thomas, I don't have the qualifications. I'd watched Rita teach herself coding during lunch breaks for the past year. She was sharp and motivated. I'll train you. That's the whole point of doing this right. Building a real team with proper growth. She started crying. Yes. God, yes. Thank you. We talked for another hour about plans for the department. She had ideas I'd never considered. Fresh perspectives from someone who understood both the technical and business sides. This was already better. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Richard Morrison. Harrison will apologize Monday at 9. Your office is being set up. Thank you for returning. The weekend felt surreal. I spent Saturday reviewing the contract with a lawyer friend who confirmed everything was legitimate and heavily in my favor. They must really need you, he said, impressed. Sunday I started planning. I made lists of documentation priorities, team structure, training schedules. Lucy found me at midnight still working on spreadsheets. Babe, you don't start until tomorrow. Take a break. But I couldn't. For the first time in 3 years, I was excited about work. Actually excited, not just resigned to it. This was my chance to build something sustainable. Something right. Monday morning I dressed carefully. Professional but confident. I arrived at the office at 8:30. People stared as I walked through. Word had clearly spread. Rita met me at my new office, which was twice the size of my old cubicle. They worked all weekend setting this up, she whispered. New desk, new computer, window view. A nameplate that said, Thomas Rodriguez, Senior Development Director. I touched the nameplate, making sure it was real. At 8:50, Richard Morrison's assistant came to get me. Mr. Harrison is waiting in conference room A. My stomach flipped nervously. This was it. The apology I'd demanded. Part of me felt petty for insisting on it. Another part knew it was necessary. Not for revenge, but for respect. I walked into the conference room. Harrison sat at the table, looking older than I remembered. Richard Morrison stood by the window. An HR representative sat with a laptop, clearly documenting everything. Thomas, please sit, Richard said formally. I sat across from Harrison, maintaining eye contact. Harrison looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Richard nodded at him. Harold. Harrison cleared his throat. Thomas, I apologize for my comments on Wednesday. Calling you replaceable was inappropriate and unprofessional. It doesn't reflect your value to this company, or the quality of your work. I'm sorry. His words were stiff, clearly rehearsed. But he said them. That was enough. Thank you, I said simply. I appreciate that. Richard took over the meeting, outlining my new role and authority. Harrison would have no oversight of my team. All technical decisions would come through me. I'd report directly to Richard. Harrison sat silently through the whole presentation, his jaw tight. When Richard finished, Harrison stood abruptly. If we're done here. Richard nodded. We're done, Harold. Harrison left without looking at me. The HR representative closed her laptop. That's documented. If there are any future issues with Mr. Harrison, please report them immediately. She left, and Richard turned to me. I know that was uncomfortable. But necessary. I agreed. Thank you for backing me up. He smiled slightly. Thomas, I've spent the last 4 days understanding what you built here. The system architecture, the client integrations, everything. You're not just valuable. You're essential. That was my failure for not recognizing it sooner. We shook hands. Let's make sure nobody's essential going forward. That's why we need documentation and training. He laughed. Agreed. Your team starts next week. My first week back was intense. I spent days untangling the launch issues, fixing bugs, and restoring system functionality. But this time, I documented everything. Every fix, every decision, every line of code had clear explanation. Rita shadowed me, learning and taking notes. By Friday, the system was stable. The launch was rescheduled for 2 weeks out. Clients were reassured. Crisis averted. But more importantly, the foundation for real change was laid. I interviewed candidates for my team. Not just for technical skills, but for attitude and growth potential. I wanted people who'd challenge me, who'd bring new ideas. No more being the only person who understood everything. That's how companies became fragile. On Friday afternoon, I ran into Harrison in the hallway. We both stopped. The silence stretched awkwardly. Finally, he spoke. The system's running smoothly. Good work. It wasn't much, but it was something. Thank you, I said. We moved past each other and continued our separate ways. My team started in week 3. Rita from admin transitioning to junior developer. Kevin, a talented programmer from a startup that had folded. And Amanda, a senior developer with more experience than me in some areas. We spent the first week just talking. Understanding each other's strengths, establishing how we'd work together, setting expectations. I told them about my previous experience. I won't let what happened to me happen to you. We're building something sustainable here. Amanda nodded approvingly. I left my last job because of toxic management. This is refreshing. We established rules. Reasonable hours unless true emergency. Mandatory documentation time. Weekly knowledge sharing sessions. No single point of failure on any system. Kevin asked the question I'd been waiting for. What about Harrison? Is he going to be a problem? I considered my answer carefully. He has no authority over us. But is still part of the company. We treat him professionally and focus on our work. They seemed satisfied with that. 3 months in, the transformation was visible. The documentation library we'd built was comprehensive. Client issues were resolved faster because multiple people could handle them. The team worked efficiently without constant overtime. We even had time for innovation, developing new features that clients actually wanted. Richard Morrison stopped by our area regularly, impressed by the progress. Other departments are asking how you've improved so much, he told me. Can you help them implement similar changes? That's how my role expanded again. Not just managing my team, but consulting across departments. Teaching other managers about sustainable practices, proper documentation, knowledge sharing. Some embraced it enthusiastically. Others resisted, set in their old ways. Harrison was in the second group. I'd see him in meetings, arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable with the changes spreading through the company. But he never directly challenged me. Richard had made the power structure clear. One afternoon, Harrison actually approached me in the break room. Can we talk? Harrison asked, looking uncomfortable. We were alone by the coffee machine. I nodded cautiously. Sure. He poured coffee slowly, organizing his thoughts. I've been doing a lot of thinking since you came back. About management, about how I treated people. He paused. You were right. About all of it. The documentation, the training, the workload. I prioritized short-term results over long-term stability. I hadn't expected this. What changed your mind? He laughed bitterly. Watching your team function efficiently while the sales department I'm managing now struggles constantly. Seeing what's possible when you build things right. He met my eyes. I'm sorry, Thomas. Really sorry. Not just the apology Richard made me give, but genuinely. I was a terrible manager, and you didn't deserve that treatment. I studied him, looking for insincerity. Found none. Thank you for saying that. It means more than the first apology. We talked for 20 minutes about management, sustainability, and learning from mistakes. 6 months after I'd quit, DataCore was a different company. My team had expanded to 7 people. We'd launched 3 major updates flawlessly. Client satisfaction was the highest it had been in years. And perhaps most importantly, I wasn't working 60-hour weeks anymore. I had time for life. Lucy and I took a vacation, something we hadn't done properly in years. We went to the mountains, hiked, disconnected from emails. I didn't worry about work emergencies, because my team could handle anything that came up. That was the point. Kevin called once, not because he needed me, but to share that they'd successfully handled a major client issue without my involvement. We've got this, boss, he said proudly. That was the best call I'd received. When we returned, Richard Morrison invited me to lunch. Thomas, I want to offer you VP of Technology. Complete oversight of all development, IT, and technical operations. I nearly choked on my water. That's a huge promotion. You've earned it, Richard said simply. The changes you've implemented have increased efficiency across multiple departments. Client retention is up. Employee satisfaction in technical roles has improved dramatically. You've proven that investing in people and processes works. We discussed the new role over lunch. More responsibility, more salary, more authority. But also more bureaucracy and politics. I'd be in executive meetings, dealing with board presentations, managing managers, instead of doing hands-on work. Can I think about it? I asked. Richard nodded. Take a week. But Thomas, this company needs leaders who understand what you understand. That people aren't replaceable parts. That sustainability matters. That doing things right is worth the investment. I discussed it with Lucy that night. It's what you've been working toward, she said. But only if you want it. Did I want it? The hands-on coding would decrease. But the impact would multiply. I could influence the entire company culture, prevent what happened to me from happening to others. I accepted the VP position on one condition. That Rita get promoted to my old role of Senior Development Director. She's ready, I told Richard. She's been learning constantly, she understands the systems, and the team respects her. Richard agreed immediately. Rita cried when I told her. Thomas, I was an administrative assistant a year ago. I smiled. And now you're directing an entire development team. That's what happens when we invest in people properly. My first month as VP was overwhelming. Executive meetings, budget reviews, strategic planning. But I kept my core principles. I pushed for documentation standards company-wide. I implemented cross-training programs. I fought against unrealistic deadlines and defended my teams when other executives demanded the impossible. Some executives resisted. They wanted the old way, push people harder, cut corners, maximize short-term profits. But Richard backed me consistently. Thomas's approach works. The numbers prove it. And the numbers did prove it. Revenue was up. Client retention was up. Employee turnover was down. We were more profitable by being more sustainable. A year after Harrison had called me replaceable, I sat in my office reviewing our annual results. DataCore had its most successful year ever. We'd grown the technical team from 15 people to 40. We'd launched 8 major products. We'd won industry awards for innovation. And most importantly, we'd done it without burning people out. My office phone rang. Harrison. We'd maintained professional courtesy, occasionally collaborating on projects. Thomas, do you have a minute? He came to my office, looking nervous. I'm leaving DataCore. Taking a management position at a smaller company. I was surprised. That's big news. Congratulations. He smiled slightly. It's the right move. But I wanted to thank you before I go. He extended his hand. You taught me more about real leadership in this past year than I learned in my entire career before. I am taking those lessons with me. We shook hands. Good luck, Harrison. After he left, I looked at the photo on my desk. Lucy and me on our mountain vacation, both genuinely happy. My phone buzzed. Rita texting. Team lunch to celebrate the annual results. I smiled and replied yes. This was what success actually looked like. Not just profit margins, but people thriving. Not being irreplaceable, but building systems where everyone could succeed. Harrison had been right about one thing. I was replaceable. We all were. But that wasn't a threat anymore. It was the foundation of something better.